Hey there, everyone. I hope that you're doing good this afternoon. I'm just going to wait a few moments, getting this thing going. Full disclosure, I have never used this software, so I'm trying something new today. While we're waiting, I'm going to share a little bit of backstory. So, about a year ago, first of all, my name is Casey Clark. You don't know me. We probably never met. If you know me, I am the chief curator at Legacy Creative. We're based in North Carolina. We've been a brand design agency for about 15 years. Full creative services. We love what we do. Well, the clients that we get to work with, but over the last year or so, we've been shifting our focus a little bit more towards, the brand owners and the person behind the brand. And so today, I'm going to share a little bit more about that. But before we get started, I wanted to just share a little bit of backstory. So about a year ago, December of last year, I was on a walk and I was having just kind of it was just part of my normal routine. I was on a walk and praying and talking, and never actually really shared this before, but it was a pretty radical encounter with the Lord, and it turned into a conversation that led to the development of what I'm going to share with you today, which is Brand Discipleship. It's a framework that I have been working on personally, developing it for myself, kind of going through the process just in my own business and my own life. And then it has just become a process that I've walked through with clients, and now I'm walking through with friends. And recently, just a couple of weeks ago, I was able to share a little bit more about this at the Guild Conference in Raleigh, North Carolina. Some good friends of ours have been running that for about 5 years now. And just a real sweet community. If you don't know about the Guild Conference, you need to check it out. Their motto is soul care for the Christian creative. And that really resonates with me, resonates with my wife. And when we began developing our own rhythms and our own cadence in life and our creative walk, and then just running a business, as we began doing that, we started seeing some gaps in our own development. And we started seeing some things in my life that I wanted to start focusing on. Part of that was I building from a place of identity? Was I building from a place that I know who I am, I know what I'm called to do, or am I building from a place of approval? That turned into conversations. Again, over the past year, many conversations, many walks, and talking with God and asking questions. In the past 6 months, this has developed into some more solid frameworks. About 6 or 7 months ago, I developed what's called the imprint assessment, which I also shared at the Guild. That has become a tool that I've shared with many people to help them understand where they sit within this framework. And I'm going to go over that today. So let me dive right in. Today, we're going to be talking about the identity gap. I hinted at that earlier, but essentially the identity gap is this place between where we know who we are, we know what we're called to be, but we have a hard time executing on those things. Or we're really good at executing ideas, but we lose ourselves in the process. And so today I'm going to kind of talk about why your brand maybe feels stuck, because if you know who you are, but you don't know how to execute, then you get stuck because you're solid, you're confident, you know who God's called you to be, but you have a really hard time taking those ideas, that inspiration, and putting it out into the world. My good friend Corey Fry calls it giving it its social life. Or, like I said before, you're really, really good at ideas. You're really inspired by trends. You're really good at keeping up with those things, but you have a really hard time staying focused on who you are, or you've never really sat still long enough. You just have been busy. Um, in brand discipleship, we call that optics over obedience. Becoming over building is the other side of this, where you're really good at becoming, but you have a hard time building. So, we're going to get started today. So, again, today we're going to focus on the identity gap, and today we're going to be talking about why it exists. Why does this even happen to us? Why do we find ourselves kind of in between these two spaces? Then we're going to talk about how it affects your brand, your voice, and your work. We're going to talk about the four pillars. We're going to talk about the framework and some of the processes that I've used to help me kind of develop my own rhythm and cadence. And then finally, what does alignment look like when identity is leading the way? How do we switch some of these dynamics from optics over obedience to obedience over optics? How do we switch from building over becoming to becoming over building? Really, really prioritizing who we are becoming in this process, because the reality is this: if you are becoming the truest version of who God's called you to be, what you create is going to be really authentic, and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be awesome. You're going to feel really, really connected to the work that you're doing. It's going to be very authentic. So I know that's something I'm super passionate about. I have spent the last year personally trimming the fat, getting rid of things that I don't need to be focusing on. Looking forward to 2026, where we get to maybe build some team and start handing some things off so that I can stay in my lane. Because the reality is this, is that I am really only good at a few things, but I've spent the last 15 years trying to be good at everything. One last thing before we get started. One of the things about this that really became clear to me is that I had a friend of mine say, "Man, you know a lot about, a little about a lot of things." And I started thinking about that. I'm like, is that a slam? Is that a good thing? I really had a hard time reconciling how I felt about it. But when I really thought about it, I was like, actually, that makes a lot of sense. Why I feel so spread thin, because I've spent so much time investing into knowing a lot of things so that I could be a lot of things to a lot of people. And it was just wearing me out because I'm running back and forth between all of these different aspects and dimensions of my life and my work, and never really getting to focus. So I'm not seeing growth. I'm not seeing progress. I'm getting burned out. So anyway, all that to say, we're going to dive into some of these things today, and I hope it's helpful for you. I hope that this is so. Looking forward to diving into this with you. So looks like my camera just flopped here to a different camera. So let's keep going. I'm not going to worry about the camera. All right. This is more important. All right, so we're going to do a quick introduction. We're going to talk about why the identity gap exists. We're going to talk about how it affects our work, our voice, our brand, the pillars, what alignment looks like when we're really, really, truly working from identity. And then finally, if there's some folks on here who have any questions, I'll open it up. All right, so the intro. Today we're talking about these four things. We've already gone over it. Let me give you a quick example. Why brand discipleship? Because somewhere along the way, branding became more about optics and obedience, more about performance than purpose. And in my agency, I've seen creatives and founders who have a deep faith. They have a deep passion for something. They're trying to fit into formulas. They're trying to figure out where they belong. And I know that feeling, and I'm sure you probably do as well. But it's really hard when you're trying to always find out where you fit, because eventually you just realize I don't know where I fit, and it's really hard to then reflect who you really are. Um, in this world, in this day and age, a lot of times we're trying to go viral. Like, a lot of people are trying to build something really fast in hopes that it will set them up for success. Um, but that's really where the optics over obedience thing has to come into play. We'll get into more of that later. but no one's really showing them how to create from that place of true identity, where you're rooted in clarity, obedience, and you have some spiritual depth. You're really, really connected with God. You really know who you are, and so really, brand discipleship is really about an alignment with who God's called you to be, and it's really not working for approval. It's not working for this like performance mentality. Performance over purpose is really where the trap we find ourselves in. We lose purpose because we're just performing. We're outperforming ourselves. We're on a hamster wheel. And finally, brand discipleship it invites leaders to reflect the kingdom through subtle, intentional, creative flows. Creativity that flows from who you're becoming, not just what they do. And I know that that is something that's really been helpful for me as we've gone through this development of this process. Um, so why does any of this matter? Probably already asking yourself the question, why does any of this matter? Well, before we talk about brands or creativity or calling, we have to talk about identity. If you're not building from identity, you're building for approval. That's just kind of how it works. If not right out of the gate or for approval, eventually it's going to be performance based. It's not going to be purposeful. It's not going to feel meaningful. That's the trap that a lot of us get caught in. Most entrepreneurs, creatives, and leaders aren't actually struggling with strategy. They're actually struggling with alignment. They don't know where they belong. They're not really sure where their ideas fit. They have a lot of them, especially people like myself, people like yourself, where you might be an entrepreneur, you may be highly creative, you're constantly getting ideas, and you're like, good, I don't know where they fit. And it's really hard because if you don't know who you are, you can't really weed out which ones are good ideas or great ideas or God ideas. It's really difficult, and you just get stuck in that cycle. Um, so yeah, I mean, we have a ton of ideas, but we can't execute. You have clarity about what you're building, but you still feel lost internally. You can feel successful or look successful on paper, but you're still unsure of who you're becoming. That one is probably the biggest out of all of these, because that's the optics, right? You look successful online. You got the numbers. You got the revenue. Um, or you got the clout, or you got the streams, you got whatever metric in your world matters. If you got those, but still on the back side of things, when you're putting your head down on your pillow at night, you're like, none of that really matters because I feel more lost now than ever. Um, and you can build momentum, but still feel disconnected from why am I doing this. Simon Sinek has this great book called Start with Why. Most people start with what or how, but not why. And if you start with why, which is again today, we're starting with identity. Identity is why am I here? God, who does God call me to be, and why am I here? What am I doing? So, um, none of those are a strategy issue. They're strictly identity based. Brand discipleship exists because God forms people before He forms platforms. He's really not interested in that. We're going to get into that a little bit later when we talk about the pillars. We're going to talk about how Moses was elevated. He was brought to a high place, but it wasn't for status. So we're going to get into that a little bit more. He's really interested in the person, not the product. He's really interested in shaping identity before he gives you any level of influence. And when your identity isn't aligned, everything built on top of that feels really unstable. Your brand, your voice, your leadership, your work, all of it just feels a little shaky. Doesn't feel very aligned. It feels off. And sometimes we don't know why that is until we realize, oh, my identity is not rooted. So this is why we start here. This is where the conversation really gets traction, and this is what really matters. All right, so let's talk about the identity gap. That's what we're here today to talk about. Why you feel stuck in your branding, why you feel stuck in your development, why you feel stuck as a creative, as an entrepreneur, whatever role you find yourself in. You're attracted to so many different things, but you're really having a hard time understanding where things are going. We're going to get into this right now. Here's some really good news. This is something that I love. This is why it's so important to have rhythms with Scripture. Part of the pillars is there's these processes, and one of them is Scripture. God thought you up before time. Before there was time, he thought of you. Go read Psalm 139, 15 through 17. There's books written about you. Your days are numbered. And I don't mean that in a bad way, your days are numbered. I mean, God has plans for you. You're his poetry. Ephesians 2:10 says you're a masterpiece, and the poema, the poetry of God. Jeremiah 1:5. And this is one of my favorite ones. You know, a lot of us as creatives, we have this longing in our heart. We have this thing where it's like, me and Julia, my wife, talk about this a lot, where it's like, man, I always feel this like longing, this pull. And I've begun to wonder, is that because God has set eternity in our hearts? Like, even when we achieve things, sometimes it doesn't feel like it's like that doesn't feel like it's enough. It still feels like there's more. And that's not a bad thing, because it's the fact that he set eternity in our hearts. That even when we achieve things here on this side of eternity, it still isn't, it's still incomparable. It doesn't compare to what God has really set us for. But it is why we feel a longing towards certain things, because he's written stories about us. He's written things into our lives. And when we're misaligned, when we're not really walking in our identity, we feel that. We feel the tension, the pull. And this identity gap is a really, really clear picture of how that works. So life and choices, wounds, fear, external pressures, they all distort the process. All of these things. I just recently I went to and left a men's retreat where we really focused on beliefs, internal belief systems. And I never realized how much and how important it is that the core beliefs we have affect these things, like these internal pressure systems that are going on inside of us all the time, being triggered and hit all the time. They affect our identity. Um, so this is what creates the identity gap: the space between our original design and who we're becoming, the trajectory that we're on, and the established trajectory that God has for us. All right. So again, we're just going to go over some of this stuff again. We're going to get into the thick of it here in a minute. The identity gap is the distance between who you think you are, who you say you are, what you communicate about yourself, your brand, in this terminology, and who you're actually becoming. Like, who has God really established you to become? Like, there is a you, and we're going to talk about that later when we get into the pillars. It shows up in most creatives and entrepreneurs when they're experiencing this. They feel scattered, even though they're really, really gifted, their natural gift. One of my favorite scriptures says that our gifts come without repentance. Like, we don't have to love God. We don't have to follow God to operate in our natural gifting. It's just going to happen. You could be really, really good at making money. You could be really, really good at making music, making things, creating things, putting things out in the world, building things. And you don't have to follow God to do those things, because they're your natural giftings. They're the gifts that come from God. Sometimes we're feeling called, but we're unclear about what do we do with it. We feel pressure to perform instead of confidence to really steward what we've been given. We're trying to build something meaningful while feeling sort of unsure, or maybe we're not, like, we feel unsure. We don't feel like we're enough. That's the biggest thing that a lot of us run into, is we don't feel like we're enough. We're comparing our calls to others. Comparison is the chief killer of creativity. It is the biggest thief of our joy and our creativity. And then feeling spiritually disconnected in our work. So here's just a quick diagram. So this idea of like our design and our becoming, who we are and who we're becoming. If there's a gap between those things, then there's misalignment. And this is really kind of where we really start to dial this in. You have vision, you don't have a voice, you have an identity gap. If you have dreams but no direction, you have an identity gap. If you have assignments but no sense of identity gap. You got ideas and no inner formation to sustain it. You don't have any rhythms in your life that are keeping you connected to God, because those ideas are coming from God. Those ideas might be coming to you, but you don't have anything that, like, you don't have gas in the tank to really sustain those rhythms. And it affects everything. It affects your creativity, your decisions, your communication. I mean, how many of us, if we're married, how many of us can find ourselves relying on our spouses and our partners to tell us who we are, Like, how many times have we found ourselves in that? How many times at work are we looking for someone to tell us who we are, our friends to tell us who we are? We're not going to the Lord and asking those questions. We're looking for other people to do that. So our communication, our relationships, our confidence is affected, our leadership, and definitely our spiritual life is affected. And this is why we use the word gap. If you don't close it, clarity will always be out of reach. If you don't seek to find how to be aligned with who you are and your identity. The very things that make creatives and entrepreneurs gifted are the same things that make them vulnerable. So I know for me, I'm constantly having ideas. Some of my strongest strengths, my working genius, if you're familiar with the working genius, is invention and enablement, which means I can sit across the table from a client or from a friend who's sharing like some dreams and visions, and I immediately start thinking ideas. And then I'm drawn naturally, passionately to lock arms with them and walk with them to see those things through. That's why it's really, really suited for what I do, and the lane that I'm looking to be more aligned with, because I'm constantly wired with ideas. But that same strength can get ahead of me because I can get a bunch of ideas and not really choose the right ones that are really aligned with me. Here's the good thing. Sometimes those ideas are coming to me, but they're for someone else. So I have to learn also how to create rhythms and places where I can write things down and not necessarily say I have to figure out how to make that happen. I just have to say that's a gift. I'm going to receive it, and I don't know where it's going to go, but it will go somewhere. You're sensitive to all the possibilities. One of my favorite questions to ask is, "What if? What if?" But that same sensitivity can make my internal world really loud, because what if that's all I'm focused on is all the possibilities, I can lose sight of really the big picture. You're very future oriented. One of my strongest gifts is also, or my strengths is being futuristic, thinking ahead. But we can get ahead of ourselves if we're too future oriented. And then you're deeply aware of problems and solutions. Let me cover just a few more here. You're designed to create and contribute, but without any sort of grounding, any sort of community, spiritual grounding, all that just becomes performance, or it can be. And then you have gifts, but gifts flow whether you're healthy or not. So like I said before, your gifts come without repentance. They are gifts. They're just things that you were given at birth. And this is why the pillars matter, because they tell you where the break is, like where's the disconnect, where you're actually not really aligned, so you can respond to that accordingly. Here's a picture of what that looks like. Basically, as your design and you're becoming who you're becoming in your original design, when they begin to overlap, that's where we see alignment. And we're going to get into that. And this is kind of where the pillars and some of the frameworks come as well. All right, so here we go. We're going to dive into the pillars. The pillars are really, I just want to say this right out front. If you've ever taken personality tests or like Enneagram, anything like that, things like the Enneagram, where it's like it really is kind of helping you understand your motivations. Myers-Briggs is kind of helping you know your personality. Working Genius is kind of helps you know how you sit with an organization, like what are the ways that you really contribute the best. This is not one of those tests. Think of the pillars as mirrors. They're not steps towards a goal. They're not locations on a map. They're not like, this is me, this is where I live, and this is where I radiate. No, these are places in your spiritual and your creative life that reveal where God is forming you in the moment. Like, where do you sit on the continuum of your journey with God? And where is he forming you right now? It doesn't mean that this is where he's focused. It just means that this is maybe where you're spending a lot of your time. It may mean that some areas are out of balance. It may mean that some places do need your attention. It may just uncover why things don't feel aligned. So they work together. They're kind of in a cycle. They build on one another, and they give you language for where you are and where you're growing right now. So let me go over these real quick with you and just kind of give you a quick overview, and then we'll keep going. So imprint. Imprint is really this. Like the whole thing behind brand discipleship was rooted in this one conversation I had with the Lord. I was like, man, I love this idea. This is really great. I feel really connected to this. I've like in the journey of me walking through this process of formation with the Lord, I was like, man, I really want to create something out of this. And the idea came, and I'm like, well, what's it supposed to look like? And as a designer, I'm like, man, there's got to be a logo. How cool would that be? And I was like, what should the logo be? And I'm thinking. He's like, what about a fingerprint? I'm like, that's lame, which is the second time I've told the Lord that his ideas are lame. But then he was like, Casey, this one thing, this one unique identifier, no one else has this one. Look at your thumb. He told me, look at your thumb. I looked at my thumbprint and I'm like, wow, no one else in the world has that. So the first one here that we're going to talk about is imprint. You're the only one who carries what you carry. Now, I want to push back against a very well known thought. It's a lie that I had to like unravel in my own life. It comes from a story in the Bible, which is interesting, and I'm still unpacking this. But when the Lord told David, you are not going to build the temple, your son will. I remember having some moments and some conversations with the Lord where I felt like he was telling me, hey, there's some things in your life that I've asked you to do, but you're not actually going to be able to finish them. And I began believing that I'd done something wrong. So what I'm getting at is this. You're the only one who carries what you carry. And sometimes there may be some things that you feel passionate about, some things that you feel called to build, but you might not be the one to actually fulfill it. In my age, I'm 52 years old. I am seeing in my stage of life where I am now getting past the age of fulfilling some of the dreams, but I'm seeing God put community around us, and I'm seeing my capacity to pour into people who can see those things to fruition. So really the truth of the matter is this, is that yes, we have a calling, we have assignments, we have things that God's really given us passion for, but your imprint doesn't necessarily mean fulfillment. It means the image, the imago Dei in us. So this pillar uncovers how clearly you understand your identity and your God-given assignment. We're going to talk a little bit about that later when we unpack imprint more, the idea of calling and assignment. Mountain is clarity comes when you rise above the noise. Who all knows how noisy the world is? Not just the internet, not just social media, not just our own conversations in our own lives, but like even internally. We'll unpack that in a little bit. This pillar reveals your sense of calling and the people or places you're called to. You can really only do that when you kind of rise above the noise. You can't really get clarity. You can't kind of see. You can't get vision. Inner places. It comes from in the Psalms where God desires truth in your innermost places, the hidden places. We're going to get into that a little bit later when we talk about this. This pillar measures the health of your unseen world and the integrity between your private and your public life. And then lastly, overflow. Your brand becomes a witness that flows from presence, meaning you have the ability to build things, make things that are coming from a really, really deep place that's been curated within your world. This pillar measures what comes out of your life as creativity is flowing from partnership with God. So I'm going to dive into these and unpack them a little bit more. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. I'm not going to blow through this. If you want to learn more about this, take the imprint assessment. I'll give you a link after this. Take the imprint assessment. It'll unpack some of those things. And if you want to get on a clarity call with me to talk a little bit more about this and how it maybe applies to you specifically, you can do that as well. So imprint, identity is design. It's original. It's intentional. God was very, very intentional. Psalm 139 tells us that our story was written before our life began. Ephesians 2:10 calls us God's workmanship, his poetry, his masterpiece. And identity isn't something that you hustle for. A lot of people get caught up in this trap. I know I get caught up in it sometimes as well. It's something you receive. This is why it's so important to have these pillars, this framework, and these rhythms in your life in some form or fashion. And to make this clear, God gave you a visual metaphor, your fingerprint. Remember, we talked about that earlier. Your fingerprint. No one else has yours, and He gave you 10. How cool is that? Each one of these is completely unique to you as a human being, as an individual, and no one else has them. And that's how intentional He is about their design. Here's the key insight: calling can't be copied. Your calling, your unique calling, that's really attached to who you are and who you're becoming, it can't be duplicated. It really can't be. Now, assignments can. Let me shut this lid up real quick. I'm starting to get the glory glow over there. Calling can't be a copy, but assignments can. And here's what that really looks like. We live kind of in a copy-paste world. There's a lot of systems. There's a lot of like trends and templates and formulas, and mimicking that really does work. I mean, there are formulas to certain things and they work, but your calling, like your God-given identity, cannot be duplicated. It just can't be. Assignments, they can overlap though. Think about when you go to work for a company, they have culture, right? They have certain ways that they do things, and that's by design. Like that's by design. And the reality is this: is that something about you, whether it was financial or whether it was like I just need a job, may be the case. But the reality is this: something about that told you there was some form of a connection. And that's what I mean is that assignments can overlap because they are attached to a vision. They're attached to the owner's vision, which trickles down and overflows into people who are like, hey, I have similar connection to that. But calling really is personal and it's rooted in your identity. Imprint asks us these questions. How well do you know who you're becoming? How aligned are you with what God designed for you? And are you operating out of identity or are you operating out of imitation? Is this approval based? Is this like, hey, I'm going to mimic this because I know it wins. I know that there's success. I'll get the metrics. I'll get the accolades. So this is why we begin here, because this is it. Like this is getting to this down to our DNA, like who we are, who we're made to be. And it reveals our calling. Our calling reveals assignment, and assignment reveals or produces, I hate to use that word, impact. The next one is mountain. I said this a minute ago that the world's the noisiest it's ever been, and it'll just keep getting louder. Not just culturally, but internally. Did you know that we have about 30 to 50,000 thoughts a day? Imagine that. Just constantly, just always on. We have pressure, internal pressure, as well as external pressure. We have content overload. If we're not putting our phones down, if we're not getting off the computer, if we're not going for a walk, just with me, myself, and I'm going to be barraged with things. John Eldridge has a great book. I can't remember the title of it right now. I think it's like The Journey Back to You or something like that. But he talked about walking through an airport and just being barraged, like bombarded with marketing just everywhere he looked. It was like inescapable. And that's just the world that we live in. Not only that, we have expectations, our own and others. We have self-doubt. We have mental clutter. We just are not offloading. And then we have emotional overwhelm. And noise makes clarity nearly impossible. And this is why God calls us up. That's why God called Moses up onto the mountain when he gave him the Ten Commandments. Think about it this way. Moses is leading 2 million people. Like imagine this. He's leading 2 million people, I think 2 million people out of Egypt into the promised land. He's definitely overwhelmed. He's exhausted. He's a human being. He's got to be feeling all these things. He's feeling everyone's problems. At some point, his father-in-law, like, bro, you need help. Like, get some people to help you handle these matters, like in succession. He's trying to hear God and he's trying to lead at the same time. And in the midst of all this, God says, come up higher. He invites him up to Mount Ararat. Not Mount Ararat. Forget where he, I forget actually where he called him up to. Anyway, not a Bible scholar. Because on the mountain, here's what's happening. Noise becomes distance. Distance creates perspective. Perspective creates clarity. Clarity creates vision, and vision creates the opportunity to steward something. So how does that work? Like, what does that actually look like? So God calls Moses up to the mountain. He gets him above the noise. He creates distance between all of the noise that's going on around him and gets him up to the top of the mountain. And in this place, he doesn't flatter him with status. It's like he doesn't bring him up higher to elevate him over people. He just actually brings him up higher to bring him closer. And he entrusts him with a responsibility. And that's what happens when God calls us into these places. He wants to give us vision and clarity, and he wants us to be able to. He wants to tell us, this is who I want you to be focused on. These are the things I want to give you. I'm giving you words. I'm giving you vision. Sorry for all the dings here on my computer. But note the nuance here. So, mountain is where God gives perspective and direction. But there is a little bit of a nuance. We're about to get into inner place. And mountain and inner place both involve solitude, but for different reasons. Mountain is elevation, a higher perspective and clarity, being able to see further, see down, but also see further. Whereas inner place is more like I'm going to kind of excavate some of the things that are going on in my life. I'm going to get honest with God. I'm going to get honest with myself. And I'm going to allow myself to go through a process of formation. So it's internal. It's the solitude, but I'm looking inward. Whereas mountain is where I'm still alone. I'm maybe not in the company of a bunch of people and distracted by all the noise, but I'm still by myself and I'm looking over. The reality is this: is that we need both. We need both of these encounters. So moving on to inner place. So Psalm 51 talks about God desires truth in the innermost being. The inner place is the hidden work. It's where our motives are formed. It's where they're exposed. It's where our desires are exposed. It's where we see the wounds in our heart, if we're honest. It's where we understand where we have attachments, maybe fears, longings. It's where our integrity is uncovered and discovered. Like, where is that level of integrity in our lives? And it's where wisdom and discernment are formed. This is where God forms a person who will carry the calling. The inner place is where God slows you down. He speaks really quietly. He untangles our motives. He heals what's under the surface, heals our wounds. He strengthens our identity, and he forms our character, and he anchors our soul. In this place, it's really not about perspective. It's not about like, how should I look at this? It's about just getting to like the truth. Like, let's get to the heart of the matter. Let's get to this place, because this is where we really, really get down to the core and the seed of our true identity. It's like I was saying earlier, it measures the health of our unseen world. Like, there's a lot of things about our life that people don't see. And there's matters of integrity, there's matters of our private and public life that God is forming. He's doing something in us. I was going to share this just a minute ago. I can't remember what it is now. God slows you down, speak quietly, untangles our motives, knows what's in the surface. It'll come to me. It'll come to me. And here's where it teaches you to hear God in the stillness. I know for me, I cannot stand being still. If I sit with myself too long, I will get too many ideas and I just get distracted very easily. This one is probably this is my lowest right now in this season. I feel a lot of pressure when I try to sit still, but that pressure is good for me. It helps me. It reminds me of like, man, God, I need you. Like, this pressure system is pointing to something. It can kind of teach you, like, the whole point of inner place is teaching us how to sit in the noise and still have a stillness in our heart, to be able to resist the pressure systems of the world, because we have a pressure system in us that's bigger than the pressure systems of the world. Helps us to resist the chaos. In the midst of the chaos, we can hear God. and just the pressures of everyday life, because things are just going to happen. I know for me, the way that this plays out sometimes. I know what I was going to say earlier. Have you ever asked yourself? I'll finish this thought in just a moment, but I want to interject this. Have you ever thought to yourself, when I ask God to speak to me, and then when I hear His voice, why does that sound like me? And so I asked God one time, I'm like, hey, why is that? He's like, who else am I going to sound like? I live inside of you. I live inside of you. I reside in you. You are my temple, and I reside in you. How else, when I'm speaking, what do you expect it to sound like? And it kind of just sealed the deal for me. I was like, okay, I'll no longer question those things. Now, do I practice discernment and wisdom? 100%. But I don't doubt when I'm hearing, uh, when I ask the Lord to speak and I hear Him, I don't doubt any longer if it sounds like myself. I don't say, oh, that's just me. I don't discount it, at least. Um, so anyway, like we were saying before, there's some similarities between mountain and inner place. Mountain teaches you to rise above the noise. Inner place teaches you to hear God within it. And they're really, really important. They're both essential in this development process. So the last one, overflow. This is the expression of all of this formation that's happened, right? We understand who we are with imprint. We get above the noise. We can see vision. We can see clearly. We get vision. And then we have this this inner place where we connect with God in a really, really unique way, in a really there's just intimacy. We're able to hear Him, and all of this is the formation process, and the result of all of this is overflow. Again, it's not an end result. This is going to happen in so many different ways. Um, but overflow is the expression of the formation that's happening as we understand who we are. Um, it's where identity, clarity, and formation turn into leadership and creativity and impact. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is John 4, with the woman at the well. If you're familiar with it, Jesus shows up at a well. The Samaritan woman asks her to draw a cup of water for him. And if you're familiar with the story, you understand the tension there. She's Samaritan, he's Jew, and it ends with this interaction where he says, "Woman, if you knew who it was that was asking you for a drink, you would ask him for a drink." I had a client of mine who he was really, really, he wasn't a Bible scholar, but he just had a really, really amazing way of unpacking some of these stories. I called him the most tweetable person in the world when Twitter was still a bird. But he said this, he said he didn't just give her water, he gave her her own will. And I thought that was beautiful because, a lot of times in our formation process, if you're familiar with the summer camp, the youth camp analogy, you go to youth camp, you have an encounter with God, and you get saved again, and you go and you make all the promises. I'm not gonna fall away again this year. I'm gonna love God my whole year at school. And then of course, the pressure system of the world is bigger than the pressure system that's been built inside of us. God's still developing. He's still growing something inside of us. And so oftentimes I attach this same thing of like, what if in those moments when we have those encounters, we allow God to show us what it means to tap into, the artisan spring. A well is like drilling way, way, way down, finding that source and staying connected to it. That's really what's happening here. Overflow is all of this formation process is going on, and it helps us tap into identity, it helps us tap into vision, and it helps us tap into a constant connection with God. And then overflow is just the natural result. Um, the other side about this is something I just wanted to bring up, is that sometimes it's easy to live on other people's revelation. That's why it's important to tap into this identity thing. It's easy to borrow revelation. I already talked about summer camp, but conferences, podcasts, books, coaches, mentors, emotional highs, all of these things, they're not bad. They're good. We can glean from them, but they have to be informing. They have to be helping us continue to dig our own well and really tap into that place with God. Borrowed revelation fades. It doesn't sustain you. If it's someone else's revelation, if it's someone else's identity, I mean, again, this is all going back to identity. But Jesus said, a spring will rise up from within you. When he spoke to her, he was like, if you drink from this well, you'll never be thirsty again. You will have your own spring that will flow from you. So overflow is really spirit-shaped creativity. It's spirit-led solutions. It's ideas rooted in formation and work that reflects who you're becoming. It's leadership marked by presence, not pressure. Like, I don't feel pressure to do something because the pressure system in me, the thing that I'm building with God, is giving me confidence because I know who I am. I have vision and I have confidence in my walk with him, and it just flows out of us naturally. So your gifts will flow whether you're healthy or not. That's something that we need to be aware of. Like whether you're in a good place or a bad place, your gifts will flow. But overflow ensures that what is coming from you has weight, has kingdom weight. All right. So I just want to say this one thing. When you're thinking about these pillars, again, they're just mirrors. I personally, I score low on overflow, and here's why. I have a pretty clear idea of who I am. I'm pretty strong with imprint. I find it easy to rise above the noise. I get away pretty often, but I can get distracted. With the inner place thing, I can get distracted when I'm by myself. There's moments where I'm like really locked in, but for the most part, it's difficult for me. So seeing things through gets a little bit stifled. So overflow is a little bit of a struggle for me. It kind of scores low. Now, that doesn't mean all the time. If I retake the test, depending on where I'm at in seasons, it may score a little bit higher. So these are the pillars. These are some things. I'm going to share these slides with everybody once this is all done. But just go look through these. These will kind of help you understand, like if you're taking the assessment, your score is going to be emerging, in motion, or anchored. And these are just going to kind of give you some understanding of where these are, the pillars, related to kind of maybe where you are, where you might need to be working on it, where you might be kind of crushing it at the moment. And then the process, this is where we can kind of get an idea of like, what are some areas that I can be working on? So for instance, if I in imprint am emerging, it's kind of pointing to these areas and kind of what might be going on. Like this might actually be going on in my life if I am in this realm. So get a little bit more into that. So we're on the home stretch here. Thanks for hanging out with me. So what alignment looks like when identity leads the way. When identity is aligned, your creativity feels really connected. Like you feel like it's like flow state, right? Your decisions become a little bit simpler. There's not as much cognitive load. There's not as much decision fatigue. Your voice gains confidence. You can really clearly communicate things confidently because you're not relying on your own strength. God has really just been working in you. The identity is strong. Your work feels really rooted. It feels connected. Your calling is pretty clear. Like you have a really strong idea of like what you're called to do. The things that you put your hand to, your leadership, it carries weight. Your influence becomes stewardship. All of a sudden, you're caring for people when you're acting out of your identity. When you're following into that calling and you're really locked into assignment, it really feels like you're stewarding something. It feels like you're partnered with God, and it doesn't feel like you're having to work for it. You're not performing. Your pace slows into obedience, and you don't feel like you're striving. Hebrews 4:11 says that we make every effort, we strive to enter rest. I love that scripture. And then alignment produces clarity, it produces peace, direction, focus, sustainability, freedom. Again, I'm going to share this with you. I don't want to bore you with a lot of this. But this is why brand discipleship exists. It's to help you become the person that God designed. You were on his mind. Jeremiah 1:5 and Psalm 139. You were on his mind. He was thinking about you. He had thoughts towards you. You're the person that God designed. So your brand, your work, and your leadership, They all become expressions of who you're becoming, not masks that you hide behind. Um, so last little thing here, the imprint assessment. I want to kind of just unpack this for you a little bit. So identity, it becomes calling, and then calling kind of leads us to assignment. This is why the imprint assessment is so helpful. Because when you uncover identity, calling becomes a little clearer. When your calling becomes clearer, assignments begin to make sense. And when your assignments make sense, your work stops feeling random. It starts feeling a lot more rooted and on purpose. Remember, we're not talking about performance, we're talking about purpose. And that's why the imprint assessment exists. And again, just to reiterate this, it's not a personality quiz. It's a tool to help you answer questions. It's a mirror. I can stand and I can look at these results. I can take this assessment and I can look at these results and I can say, how well do I know who I am becoming? Am I dialed in? Am I connected with God? Am I hearing Him? How aligned am I with the identity God has given me? Where am I operating from imitation instead of design? Where am I copying? Where am I just like rinse, repeat? Where am I following trends, or I'm chasing optics? And how do I start living so I can, or how do I start listening so I can live from calling instead of comparison? Again, comparison is just the chief thief of creativity, and God has invited you in to co-create with Him. So the big picture of the imprint is ultimately this: that you can't really walk in your calling if you don't know who you are. If you don't know your identity, it's going to be really hard for you to walk in your calling. If you can't steward your assignment, if you don't know who you're becoming. So you're trying to walk out these dreams and these things, these longings, like we talked about earlier in Ecclesiastes. This eternity is set in the hearts of men and women. God has set this longing in us, and we're like going after it, but like we don't know who we are. So it's just going to be just this rat race. If you don't know who you're becoming, you're not going to really be able to steward your assignment well. And if you can't build something that lasts, if you're building from someone else's blueprint, again, this whole copycat thing, it's just, that is like, I need to do another video about that, because that's a big one. And just finally remember, like, God wrote a story about you. The imprint is what helps you hear it again. This assessment helps you, it reminds you of areas where you're like, oh yes, these rhythms are important. So lastly, if you have some questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If you don't have any questions, I'm going to send all of this information over, and I'm going to send all this information over. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. You can also email them to me at casey@branddiscipleship.com, and I'd be glad to give you some more information. I'm going to give you a few things. I'm going to give you the link to the imprint assessment, because I want you to take that. You can also, if you're seeing this on social, you can also send me a DM with the word quiz, and it will automatically send you the link and the link to the replay for this. And then finally, I'll send you the slides as well. But I just want to say thanks for showing up. Again, this is not a pitch. There's no pressure here. This is just a space to kind of process through this thing that's been developing in me, this process that I've been on. Brand Discipleship is really just a journey for me. As it relates to my company, Legacy Creative, it's really just a formational process that I can walk my clients through, because a lot of my clients do come. They've got great ideas. They've got things they want to build, but I can tell pretty quickly if they're kind of like building out of a desire to like be a market trend or something like that. And those are topics that are for another day. But the reason this exists is because I actually just really care about the person behind the scenes. This actually really started, one, because I started working with some clients who I just realized, wow, they're having a really, really hard time expressing what it is that they want to build and do, and they were getting pulled in a lot of directions. And my heart really just kind of went out to them. And I didn't want to not work with them because of it. I actually wanted to help them. And so anyway, so this came out of that, but it also came out of my own personal journey starting a year ago. So this has been something that God's been working in me for a minute, and I hope that today has been helpful. Again, if you have any questions, just email me at kc@branddiscipleship.com. You can also drop a comment below, and I will reach out with some answers, or just however I can help you. And then ultimately, if you want to go a little bit further in this, you can reach out, book a clarity call. I'd love to walk with you through your results. If you have any questions about this in general, or if you have questions about your result, you can just, I'll put the link to a clarity call in the show notes below. So thanks again for sticking around. Thanks for watching. And again, I hope this has been helpful for you. And I look forward to connecting with you soon.